I didn't ask for much in retirement. After 20 years of service in the military, 20 years of grueling deployments, sleepless nights, sand in my teeth, and the sound of mortars echoing in my ears, I only wanted one thing: peace. A small slice of land I could call my own, where I could wake up to the sound of birds instead of gunfire, and where the only battles I fought were with weeds in my garden. I bought a modest house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a one-story ranch with a white picket fence that had seen better days. Out front stood an old steel mailbox, dented from years of weather, but sturdy as ever. That mailbox became more than a piece of metal to me. It carried my life. Letters from the VA hospital with my appointments. Pension checks that kept my bills paid. Notes from friends I had served with. Men who understood the things I never spoke about. And sometimes the letters that mattered most. Those from my son, who was serving overseas, following in his old man's footsteps. That mailbox wasn't pretty. It wasn't sleek or modern. It wasn't painted in the HOA approved shade of beige. But it was mine. And after everything I had given to this country, I figured I'd earned the right to keep it just the way it was. Unfortunately, my neighbor didn't see it that way. Karen. Now, every neighborhood has a Karen, but ours? Ours had the Karen. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, the kind of woman who thought her clipboard was a badge, and her rules were law. She strutted through the neighborhood like a general inspecting her troops, sunglasses perched on her nose, pen clicking with menace as she scribbled fines for trash cans left out too long or lawns that grew half an inch too high. She hated my mailbox. I knew it from the first day she stopped in front of my yard, tapping her pen against the clipboard, glaring at the old dented box like it was an insult to her kingdom. She gave me one of those fake smiles and said, "You know, we do have standards in this community. Mailboxes are supposed to be uniform." Approved. Clean. I smiled back, calm as ever. It still works. Delivers my mail just fine. Her lips tightened. It's an eyesore. The board will be discussing it. I shrugged. Ma'am, I've faced worse eyesores in my life. This one doesn't bother me. That was the first shot fired. From then on, Karen made it her mission to break me down, to push me until I bent to her will. She fined me for parking my truck half an inch over the curb. She complained about the flag I flew from my porch, claimed it wasn't on an approved pole. She even knocked on my door once to tell me the sound of my wind chimes was disruptive to community harmony. But nothing compared to what happened that summer afternoon. It was a hot day, the kind where the pavement shimmers like it's on fire. I had just gotten back from the store, groceries in one hand, sweating through my shirt. I walked to the mailbox expecting the usual stack of envelopes, bills, maybe a letter or two, but the door was hanging open, twisted like someone had yanked it too hard. My heart sank. I bent down and saw scraps of paper in the trash bin at the curb. My mail, torn open, tossed like garbage. I reached in and pulled out what was left. A letter from the VA hospital, my appointment reminder. Another envelope, ripped in half, my pension check. And then, the one that hit me hardest, a letter from my son, gone. The handwriting I'd recognize anywhere, destroyed. I felt a knot in my chest, heavier than anything I'd carried overseas. That wasn't just mail. That was my life, my health, my livelihood, my connection to my boy, and someone had treated it like trash. Then I heard her voice. "You're welcome," Karen said, standing on the sidewalk, like she had just done me the biggest favor in the world. She wore her HOA badge like a sheriff's star, clipboard tucked under her arm, smug grin plastered on her face. That rusty old thing was an eyesore, against community standards. I cleared it out for you. Consider this a warning. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The heat, the anger, the disbelief, it all boiled inside me. I had faced enemies overseas, men with weapons who wanted me dead, and I'd stood strong. But right then, looking at Karen standing there smugly while my son's letter lay torn in my hands, I felt something snap inside me. I straightened up, looked her dead in the eyes and said, steady and low, "You touched my mail?" She scoffed, waving her hand like it was nothing. "It was junk." "You should thank me. This neighborhood has standards. Maybe next time you'll buy a proper mailbox like the rest of us. I took a step closer, my voice still calm but carrying weight. Karen, do you have any idea what you've just done? Her smirk faltered, just for a second. Excuse me? You didn't just mess with paper. You tampered with federal mail. That's a felony. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. HOA rules override your rusty tin can. I was enforcing standards. Don't get dramatic. That's what she called it. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just bent down, gathered every torn piece, slid them into a folder, and walked inside without another word. Because in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a neighborly feud anymore. This wasn't about weeds or wind chimes. Karen had crossed into a battlefield she didn't understand. Mail tampering wasn't just petty harassment, it was federal law. And I was about to remind her that veterans don't just back down when someone violates their rights. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the torn letter from my son, and pulled out my phone. There was a number I hadn't dialed in a while, an old friend, a Marine brother, who had traded his uniform for a suit and now worked federal law enforcement. When he answered, I didn't waste words. I told him everything. He didn't hesitate. You've got evidence? Yes, every scrap good, he said, his voice sharp. Mail tampering is a federal crime. She's in trouble. Sit tight. We'll take it from here. As I hung up, I glanced out the window. Karen was still strutting across the street, clipboard in hand, probably thinking she had scored another victory. She had no idea the storm she had just brought down on herself. And as I sat there looking at the broken pieces of my son's letter, I promised myself something. I had fought for freedom overseas, and I wasn't about to let some HOA bully take mine away at home. This war had just begun. I didn't confront her right then. Instead, I quietly gathered the torn envelopes, slid them into a folder, and made a call to a buddy of mine, an old Marine brother who now worked in federal law enforcement. He didn't hesitate. Mail tampering is a federal crime, he told me. If she did what you said, she's in deep trouble. Just sit tight. The next morning, Karen strutted across the neighborhood with her usual smugness, clipboard tucked under her arm, stopping to berate another neighbor about their flower beds. She had no clue what was coming. An unmarked black SUV pulled up in front of her house just as she reached her porch. Two men in suits stepped out, badges glinting in the sun. The whole street paused, curious eyes peeking from windows and porches. Ma'am, one of the agents said firmly, we need to speak with you about tampering with U.S. mail. Karen laughed like it was a joke. Oh, don't be ridiculous. It was just junk mail. I was doing him a favor. She gestured toward my yard with a dismissive flick. That veteran doesn't even keep his property in line. I had every right, but the agents didn't laugh. They recited the statute, explained the penalties, and Karen's smirk started to melt. Neighbors whispered from their lawns, some recording the scene on their phones. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, calm as stone. I didn't need to raise my voice. The law was speaking louder than I ever could. When the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Karen's face went red with rage. You can't do this! I'm the HOA president, she shouted, kicking at the gravel as the agents led her to the SUV. But the neighborhood had seen enough. The queen of the HOA had finally been dethroned, and in the most humiliating way possible. As the SUV pulled away, one of the agents walked over to me. He handed me a copy of the report. You did the right thing, sir, he said. No one is above the law, not even an HOA president. I looked down at my torn letters, then back at my repaired old mailbox. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because Karen was gone, but because justice had been served. From that day on, the neighborhood changed. People who used to live in fear of Karen's clipboard suddenly breathed easier. And me? I kept my old dented mailbox standing tall, not just as a piece of metal, but as a reminder. I fought for freedom overseas, and I'll protect it here at home too. Some folks think veterans only fight battles abroad, but sometimes the fight is right on your doorstep. And this time the enemy wasn't a soldier, but a neighbor who thought she was above the law. And trust me, she'll never forget the day the veterans' mail fought back.